Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 30th, 2022. Today I'm going to discuss the urgent topic of how do you deal with the systemic collapse of the financial system and the monetary system and a collapse of the physical economy. Events of the last days have proven again that the leaders of the West are either incapable or unwilling to address the confluence of crises we face. Could they be so ignorant of the consequences of their actions? Is that possible? And while sections of the global establishment, such as the Davos Group and the City of London that's allied with them, are just plain evil and are consciously acting to depopulate the planet, why do we tolerate it? We need a new system. We need to break with this parasitical system based on speculative gains for the less than 1% of the population and replace it with an economic system in which sovereign nation states act in cooperation for the betterment of their own populations and the betterment of their neighbors and other nations. Now, in terms of this insanity as to why we need a new financial architecture and strategic architecture, let's start with two simple examples. First, the NATO summit. Their plans are to keep the war going, to keep the weapons flowing in, to prevent negotiations from occurring, to send more troops to Europe, to beef up the forces of NATO in Eastern Europe, to reject diplomacy and cooperation. To what end? They're going to end up depopulating Ukraine, leaving the place a barren wasteland. The Russian economy has not been destroyed by the economic warfare. In fact, the economic warfare convinces Russia, as well as every other country that's watching it, that the transatlantic governments have no interest in the success of their attempts to uplift their populations. It also is convincing nations of the global South that they need an alternative system to the one controlled by the financial elites of Wall Street and the City of London. So meanwhile, it's the people of the West as well as the poor countries who are suffering from this, not so much the system in Russia. So that's one example of the insanity and evil. A second one, a simple one, energy policy. You know, the U.S. shut down pipelines. They're shutting down drilling. They're moving to adopt the green economy, the decarbonization, and so on, at a point where there's shortages of energy. So what are they doing? Well, U.S. Energy Secretary Granholm is insisting that the oil companies invest large amounts of money to increase the oil supply. At the same time, she and the government are pushing a policy to shut down those companies in 5 to 10 years. How does that make sense? Now, in this situation, the vacuum of competent ideas, the unwillingness to have a debate, the idea that if you even question the military policy, you must be a Putin puppet. Or if you question the energy policy, you must be on the payroll of the big oil companies. What's happening is that LaRouche's ideas are emerging worldwide as the best alternative for the future. Many governments and thinkers outside of the transatlantic region are echoing the ideas of LaRouche. And I want to give you one example. A leading Russian economist named Sergei Glaziev, who's the Commissioner for Integration and Macroeconomics of the Eurasian Economic Commission, is someone who knows LaRouche from past discussions going back to the 1990s. Glaziev released a statement on June 28th, and I'm going to quote it for you. He's one of the people involved in putting together the integration policy of the Eurasian countries with Russia and with China. So here's what he said, quote, "A quarter of a century ago, the deepest thinker of our time, Lyndon LaRouche, proved the inevitability of the collapse of the Western financial system built on financial pyramids and bubbles. He called for the creation of a new financial system to serve the needs of expanded reproduction of the real economy. Then later on, he pointed out that today, The monetary and financial system, quote, is rapidly collapsing under the weight of imbalances, unquote. Now, Glaziev is a very serious economist who studied the economic theory of the American system as he heard it directly from LaRouche and knows the approach of the American system from the dynamics of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who was one of the founders of the city of St. Petersburg, working with Tsar Peter the Great. So there's a long tradition of the kinds of economic theories, going back to Leibniz, which were central to the establishment of the American Republic. Ben Franklin studied the ideas of Leibniz. And so with Glaziev, what you're seeing is a recognition in LaRouche of the American system, which built the United States, and which is not the financial bubble system of speculators we're saddled with today. Now, LaRouche has a proven record of forecasting, as indicated by Glaziev, based on his scientific and economic method. He's drafted numerous proposals over the years for how to rebuild the advanced sector countries and how to build up the capability to leapfrog in the developing sector to bring online modern new technologies. This is what the Belt and Road Initiative is partly attempting to do, to give countries that are victims of colonialism and neocolonialism an opportunity to do what's been done in China of lifting people out of poverty. Now, the Schiller Institute has put out a call for an ad hoc committee for a new Bretton Woods to address the idiocy of the economic policy of the transatlantic region. So far, it's been signed by more than 100 VIPs, and it's circulating internationally. I'm going to give you a little bit of background in it and then urge you to take action with us to make sure that we get this new Bretton Woods system. It opens with a review of the collapse that's underway, why it's happening and how bad it is, and then goes into an 8-point or an 8-step approach to reorganization, beginning with a bankruptcy reorganization of the world economy. It is bankrupt. We're not producing enough physical goods. That's why there are supply chain problems, shortages, and other such absurdities at a point where we could produce plenty for the whole world. So you start with a bankruptcy reorganization into a new Bretton Woods. This would include reorganizing commercial banks to protect them as generators of credit for the real economy, while putting the investment banks into reorganization, bankruptcy reorganization, no bailout for the speculators, and at the same time ban on such financial instruments as derivative trading, where a derivative is something with no underlying financial value, which is basically a bet that are used by speculators to make money while sticking these worthless instruments in your 401ks and your pension plans. It calls for a return to fixed exchange rates to take away the floating exchange rate system, which is used by speculators like George Soros to get the money they need to run regime change operations, as Soros has done all over the world. It would include debt reorganization and cancellation of some of the poorer countries' debts, such as Sri Lanka, such as Pakistan, such as Ukraine, where countries are being driven into austerity regimes controlled by the International Monetary Fund on behalf of collecting the debt for the private bankers. And it would include establishing a national bank to replace the private central banks. A national bank, meaning a government would determine the amount of credit needed to go into physical economic production, not speculation. And this would include long-term low-interest investment in the real economy. Now, this can be done. Here's what I want you to do. I'm asking everyone watching this video to click on the link below in the description section for the call for an ad hoc committee for a new Bretton Woods. Read it. Study the 8 points. If you have questions, you can ask. Tomorrow being Friday, I'll be taking your questions. Send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. Then once you've read it and understand it, sign it and circulate it and share this video. Then on July 3rd, Sunday, July 3rd, we'll be having a special discussion of what the Declaration of Independence and the fight for the American system was all about. That it was a break with the empire. We did it. We overturned the imperial control, which had the United States or the colonies under a zero growth policy of subservience to the crown. We fought that and won it. And we fought it with only a minority of the population in the battle. But we had powerful ideas from Benjamin Franklin, Hamilton, and others, which enabled the United States to become an economic powerhouse. So on July 3rd, Helga Zepp-LaRouche and others, including Diane Sayre, who's now on the ballot to run against Charles Schumer in New York for the U.S. Senate, will be discussing how this will work. So this is your job now. It's up to us, the American people, and the people of Western Europe as well, to break the power over our governments held by the criminal speculators of the City of London and Wall Street and return to the American system. I'll be taking your questions tomorrow. I really intend to have this thing succeed, but it only will succeed if you take the responsibility to make it work. So thanks for joining me. I've given you your homework. Let's talk about it.